name is Richard Hatzfeld. I am at Fin Partners. We're a global integrated marketing and communications agency. We specialize in a lot of different areas, but for this particular call, we're going to be focusing on misinformation and navigating the new information disorder that I think many of us are experiencing. Personally, I've been in public health for the better part of the last 2 decades. I've led communications work in Africa and Asia, Europe, and pretty much everywhere in between. And at Fin Partners, I lead a group that sits between our education practice, our public affairs practice, our global health practice, and pretty much every other practice that we have, making sure that we have integrated communications, focusing on what we're dealing with in the public health sphere right now, and in the global health sphere in general. And I think the nature of this conversation is going to be very much focusing on what has happened over the last year and how we can help organizations and provide you all with a bit of a blueprint for moving forward in a lot of the uncertainty that we face on a day-to-day basis. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Ken Sain, who is also going to be our moderator for the Q&A discussion today, and I expect we'll have a fairly robust discussion. Before I jump over to Ken, I'm also going to encourage all of you to put questions in the Q&A. We will triage them as we go through it, and then make sure that we can address them as much as possible. So over to you, Ken.
Thank you, Richard. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ken Sain. I'm a partner in the global education practice at Fin Partners. I'm based in Washington, D.C. I'll be moderating as much as I can today, and hopefully we'll have a good conversation. Before we jump in, let me just start with a round of introductions, and we'll start for our non-colleague, Dr. Ratzan.
Thank you, Ken, and thank you, Richard, for the opportunity to be here, and Elizabeth and CUGH for helping set this up. So my name is Scott Ratzan. I'm a public health physician. I'm based at an academic institution at CUNY Graduate School of Public Health and Health Policy in New York City. I direct a health communication for social change online master's program. And I'm engaged over the years with health communication, most notably the Journal of Health Communication, which is behind me. I've been editing for 30 years. And obviously, the field now is evolving in the digital era at a lightning pace, or whatever pace you'd like to say. And my latest activity, which I can refer to later, is co-chairing the Nature Medicine Commission on Quality Health Information for All, which is the first in the Nature portfolio of commissions. So with that, thank you, Ken. I appreciate being here with Fin Partners and advancing the field of global health.
Thank you, Scott. So now let's go to the Fin Partners team. We'll start with Marina.
Mute.
She is muted.
There you go. I did it. So nobody else can do it now. You'd think I'd figured it out by now. So apologies. It's lovely to be with you all today and appreciate the opportunity to share some of our expertise. As Ken mentioned, I'm a managing partner of the Fin Global Education Practice based out of New York. Our global education practice boasts decades of experience. We are actually the nation's oldest and largest communications consultancy dedicated specifically to education. And that really means the entire span of education from pre-K all the way through post-secondary and lifelong learning. We really feel privileged to help our clients advance efforts that realize human potential. We are privileged, as I said, to work with colleges and universities, ed tech companies, education product and service providers, local and state education agencies, ministerial and government agencies and NGOs around the world, as well as nonprofits and associations and community organizations and philanthropies. We really do understand the unique needs of our clients and work with them to help address the challenges that they're facing across the entire education system, which today is more and more complex. And we do that by really deploying the most effective and I would say timely marketing and communication strategies, because those tools and resources really are changing on a daily basis. And our goal is always, fundamentally the same: to earn your audience's trust, protect reputation, and advance the mission of the clients that we serve. So really thrilled to be engaging with you all in the conversation today, and looking forward to it.
Great. Thank you, Marina. Next up is Jennifer Robinson.
Thank you, Ken. Good morning, everyone. Echoing Marina, thrilled to be here. I'm a senior partner at Finn, and I oversee our higher education portfolio. As Marina mentioned, that means we work with colleges and universities, but what does that really mean? We work with public and private institutions of all types and sizes around the world on everything from reputational management, senior leadership, thought leadership, presidents, provosts, deans, but a large percentage of our work is on faculty research. What is their expertise? What is the research that's happening, whether that's in hard sciences like engineering or physics, or the health area? So we do a lot of work with academic medicine and public and global health in particular, whether that's specific to work that's academic medicine or epidemiology, demographics, or from the side of, say, climate science. And what does that mean? What is the impact of climate change on global and public health? So very excited to speak with you today. As Marina mentioned, our first line is always to protect the institution's reputation, protect students, protect faculty, and protect those you're trying to reach. So looking forward to this. Yes, over to you, David.
Hello, everyone. David Krejci, partner here at Finn as well. I'm on the crisis leadership team, but I'm also the leader of what we call the media forensics team here. So as we are discussing kind of the new changes of misinformation, narrative manipulation, bots, synthetic accounts, all the kind of new scary stuff that we are addressing, that's kind of my role here within this agency. I've got about 30 years of experience in the industry. The first half started as a social and digital marketer. And then I flipped literally to the other side and started defending brands and organizations within the social and digital space. And then ultimately, wrapping that into a larger crisis and or issues offering. So really excited to talk to you today. This is obviously very important. And I'm excited to investigate and get into kind of the minutia of some of the challenges that we are all facing today.
Yeah, and I think as we get into the global health side, I will also let you all know part of the conversation for this particular panel started about a year ago, when David and I were working with various clients who were entertaining the very hypothetical question at the time of what do we do if the President of the United States direct tweets about us or tweets about our leadership, and how do we manage the crisis comes and response for that type of scenario? We helped clients, many of them are household names in global health and public health, to work through that kind of scenario. And it was a very good fire drill for us because lo and behold, it turned out it wasn't so much of a hypothetical as an actual. And so in the past several months, we've already gone through and helped clients understand how to meet those changing conditions. But more importantly, I think also to anticipate. And that's part of what we're going to be talking about today is not just how do you react, but how can you start to anticipate and mitigate well beforehand. And that gets into some of the magic that I think David does on the media forensics side. Not to steal too much of his thunder, but it really starts to look at all the different pulses that we have out in global health from a communication standpoint, and trying to determine what is going to reach a reaction that is going to be unfavorable for some of our clients or some of our organizations that we work with. And then also, what can you safely ignore for the time being? So you're not having to chase a lot of different areas that could end up becoming nothing for you. And then you spend a lot of energy and a lot of resources and a lot of your leadership time really kind of going down those dead ends. So from that standpoint, I think we've had those exercises. We've also applied them to how, public health and global health organizations deal with the America First Global Health Strategy, how you start to think about what public health looks like right now in the United States and what global health looks like, and how to redefine global health in other parts of the world, and what the American leadership, what European leadership, what African leadership, and other regional leadership looks like in those spheres. So I'm going to pause there and turn back over to Ken, who's going to work through our Q&A and kind of release the hounds on this exciting panel.
Wow, that's a lot to live up to, but thank you. Let's start with you, Scott, if that's okay. Our topic is navigating the new information disorder and how institutions can protect truth, trust, and reputation. So just as a base, what do you think are some of the biggest communications issues that you've seen university tackle right now when it comes to global public health and scientific research?
Thanks, Ken. I mean, that's a huge question to kick this off. And I've been at a number of universities, and I've learned also. I was at USAID for a couple of years developing their global health communication strategy, and I've learned when I first answer a question like that, whether I work for the government or work for others, is these are my personal thoughts. They don't represent the universities or the institutions where I work. So, I appreciate being able to talk about this. I think frankly, some of the universities, and I don't know, it'd be interesting to hear from others here, are like deer in headlights. Uh, they've stopped, they're stuck, they don't know what to do. They think they go back to basics, and the basics that they've been teaching are fine. They're fundamental, they're foundational, they're stuff that everybody's studied, but they're not appropriate. Just as the Bretton Woods institutions aren't appropriate to the worlds that we face today. So, I think we're in a very interesting spot where the institutions don't know what to do. In the field of public health and other health professions, you've seen that they've also been tackled of not even being called health professions, and they don't know what to do there. Does the American Public Health Association, for example, go advocate for making sure that public health is a professional degree? Do the schools of public health have to all get together with their association? Uh, so I speak of that from a public health perspective. I think people in public health and global health are are in a tough spot. The second piece I would say is as researchers, David mentioned the synthetic accounts. Uh, we know AI, paper mills, predatory journals, all these other pieces are also coming into play that are changing the landscape that also affect communication strategies, whether you have bona fide research or not. Uh, so I think, as I sit in, faculty meetings, other places that you might say everybody is so upset they want to get together to advocate. I think we're still in this phase of being stunned, like that deer, not knowing exactly what to do. And I think that's why CUGH as an organization and others of people who are listening, how do we get better advocacy strategies and be shoulder to shoulder amongst different fields? And that's why what's unique to have education partners and a whole franchise or however you want to call your unit to deal with this, because we need from the chancellor to the president to the dean to the chair to the faculty member who's speaking on air or speaking about their research in a community group to say why they are relevant, why we need to invest in global health and health in general. And uh, we're being, lack of a better term, attacked every day at all different levels, and we need the resources of how to fight back and actually to keep global health and the compass on the right track. So, hopefully, maybe we'll get to that as we go through this discussion here today, Ken.
Great, great.
If I could add something to that, I think it's important for everyone to remember, particularly if you're in a school of global health or school of public health, that the institution, the university above you, to Scott's point, is being buffeted by everything everywhere all at once. We could have anticipated some of what happened, but I think no one expected all of it to happen from all corners at every possible aspect, whether it's funding education as a whole, cutting funding for scientific research specific to quote unquote DEI principles, cutting funding from specific agencies, cutting out certain agencies, all of it at once, and all the politics underneath. So it's important, everyone's stunned, but it's important to try not to panic, even though that's our first reaction. And I think it's important also to think about yourselves not just in a bubble within your institution. Recognize that your peers at the law school or your peers in the humanities are experiencing the same thing. So while you're looking for that advocacy and allyship across your institutions, your global health institutions, be sure to think about who else is in your university with whom you could pair up. And I mentioned climate scientists before. They're certainly under attack, and much of what they're doing has a direct link to global health, and they know it, and they want to partner with you. So it's time to pause and think about how to operate differently. To Scott's point, you can't do the same things, but think creatively about how to achieve what you need to achieve, to stick to your mission, but do it in a way that protects all partners for the short term, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So Jen, what I take from what you, thank you, but what I really take away from that is like pause and then stick to your mission, which is a common best practices that we as
Absolutely.
community, yeah.
But we
Like,
can't necessarily do it the same way. To
yeah,
Scott's point, what does that look like? No one has the right answer yet, or we'd
yeah,
be doing it, right? But I think it's that pause and plan and reflect, and we can talk later about how do you, as individual schools or individual researchers or centers or institutes, whatever you are, think about how to work with the comms teams in your school to
mhm,
prepare with them ahead of time, to think about things that might be coming down the pike. How do you make them your allies, understanding that they're the ones who are wearing the Wonder Woman bracelets all day against the media, but also your comms people at the university level. How do you get to know them better? How do you work with them? So we can talk more about that later. But I
sure,
think that's an important part of it, because you're all in it together.
great. So what about you, Marie? Do you have any other best practices that you can share?
I mean, I think all these things are true, right? And continue to be true. And I would echo Scott's notion that early on, I think everyone was quite stunned into just like frozen. I joked that it was like watching everybody play hide and seek in plain sight. Like if we don't move, it won't happen, right? And the fact is, we do need to move, and we need to move quickly and with purpose and without a playbook. So I think a lot of the challenges internally to institutions of higher learning, wherever they may be in the world, are things like the silos in which we've all been really comfortable working, right? Like I talk to these people, these are my people, this is how we do things here in this part of the institution, and those people over there do it differently, and never the twain shall meet. That cannot stand in this environment. So I would definitely think about how do we turn this challenge into opportunity to really think differently about our peers across the institutions and across the sector, if you will. Like, how does academia meet the moment? There's always a gift in every challenge, right? And it's part of what our job as communicators is, to bring that notion of, okay, so this old way of doing it, which we know inside and out and upside down and backwards and forwards, will not play here. How do we take the best of what we know and think about it in a much more dynamic and nimble way? And that feels very uncomfortable to institutions of higher ed, right? I worked for many years with an international association of engineers, and we would joke like the glacial pace would give these guys whiplash, right? Like you want things to be very steady and predictable and understandable, and that is not the reality in which we live. However, we also need to protect discipline and consistency and rigor. And that requires us to just bring different players to the table. And that can feel really awkward and alien for the communities we're serving. So I would say, look for those opportunities, release your expectations of anything returning to a world you understood and knew how to navigate predictably, and get really, really comfortable with a lot of dynamics all the time.
Great. Thank you for that, Marie. So what I'm hearing is that you're saying, we have to do things differently. Things have to happen differently. We have to live in reality. Like things have changed. We have to react to it. And you also said that there isn't a playbook, or we need a playbook. So, David, I'd like to turn to you and talk about, what is the playbook that people should follow? Not that there's only one playbook, but let's talk about what that is. These are institutions, these are research institutions, public health institutions. They're not selling bicycles. So, they don't have to respond in a consumer market. So let's talk about a playbook. David, you should know better. You should really know
Come
better.
on, we're on the third one now.
I really should. Third time's a charm. Sorry. I didn't start out well anyway. I'm focused on the doing the things differently, right? And just to be clear, everyone else but me from the agency here has a deep expertise in global health and public health and education. I'm more horizontal, and I think about the media ecosystem writ large and try to help brands, organizations, clients to navigate this new reality or whatever we want to call it. And a couple of the key takeaways that I would like to promote just as a thought starter in how to do things differently is to think about the media ecosystem entirely differently. There was a time when universities would be able to put out research and information, it would be covered in the newspaper and people would ingest it with an element of critical thinking at least, and be able to somewhat ascertain what was being said and what was being proclaimed. Now we are seeing the implications of getting information, news into our culture, into our society via our phones, where we are not able to think critically like we once were when we were watching a news segment or reading that entire story. I mean, if your child brought home their eighth grade math textbook, for example, and about every fourth column inch, there was an advertisement or there was a moving cat doing something funny, and we were asking that student, your child, to learn within the context of that textbook, you would be angry, right? Extend that idea into now how most people are getting news and reading information and research. They're looking at it on their phone. They're using their thumbs to scroll by. They're thinking heuristically instead of critically. So as we try to promote ideas in research and change and the positivity that is endemic to this industry, it's becoming more and more complicated because these are complex issues and we're expecting people to understand them via something flying by on their phone. So the first thing, while it has nothing to do with, education or healthcare, is realigning on how people are hearing from you on these digital channels and what challenge that just introduces right out of the box. It means going deep on facts and scientific information is much more difficult than it used to be, for example. So not having the expectations of once we put out this paper and we promote it in X, Y, or Z, we don't get the response like we used to. Well, there are reasons for that. So that would be number one, is the ecosystem has changed on a technical level of how people are getting their information. Secondarily, of course, we've now introduced cultural, political, ideological, religious, all sorts of things that are outside of the research or in different contexts for a consumer brand outside of whatever it is they are selling, to somehow seeing now where mobilized groups are taking news and information, manipulating it so that it supports their own agenda. So you have to understand when you're putting out information into the public stream what those cultural flashpoints are and how to avoid them when you are coming out with your research and information. It's very unfortunate. Everything I've just said in the last 5 minutes is very unfortunate, but I think it's crucial in the mindset of the new playbook that it's not just about we're going to double down and we are going to write the most beautiful holding statement or summary report or some sort of fact-based, really cohesive, clear slip of information, if you will. It's not going to get what you wanted it to get in this new environment, in part also because people are going to attack you for having said it. They're going to find ways that they can twist it slightly out of context so that it supports their agenda, not yours. So if you have an understanding of who those adversaries may be, not just from a level that is really specific to your industry or your research or your school, but also how does this potentially run into larger cultural conversations that we're having as a country and as a globe.
So
And if you don't mind, I want to ask a question of David and also of Scott, because David, you said something really interesting, and I think the audience needs to understand a little bit more what you mean by it. You talked about understanding and reading content, not critically, but heuristically. And I think it's important to define what heuristics are and what that means right now for us as we process misinformation and disinformation. But I also thought it could be a nice tag team with what Scott's doing on the Nature Commission and being able to kind of like talk through that. So sorry,
Yep.
Ken, I
No,
want
go
to
ahead.
take that a little bit.
Yeah, I like to. So, first of all, thank you for giving me the opportunity to explain what I mean by heuristics. And I can't explain the challenge of heuristics and what we're talking about without also addressing confirmation bias. So, the quickest way that I get to trying to explain how those are impacting our ability to communicate complex ideas and information to consumers is sports analogy. Sorry, but if you see let's take football as the analogy, a receiver is at the sidelines and he almost catches the ball, or maybe he does and maybe he doesn't, and are his foot in bounds. You will see every time that happens, the person on the team on offense is saying, it's a completed catch. And everybody on the opposing team is going like this, saying it's incomplete. And if it happens to be on the sidelines of the offensive team, they're all cheering because it was complete. All of those people used heuristics to assess whether or not that was a completed catch. There's no way they could have known. It happened too quickly. It's too small to see if that foot touched the line or not touched the line. So those teammates are representing heuristic decision making because they don't have data. So they immediately make the assumption of whether or not it was completed or not completed. Then confirmation bias comes in. Everybody on the offense thinks it was complete. Everyone on the defense thinks it was incomplete. Extract that now to how we are looking at our phones. And if we are, let's say, an anti-vax person and we're scrolling through our phones, we have the confirmation bias. We don't believe in vaccines, or we distrust them. We see an article with a headline. We quickly read the headline and attribute however we want to attribute the value to that headline, saying, oh, that's coming from big pharma, I don't trust it, or it's coming from a point of view that I agree with and I trust it. They don't read it. It's just like those players in the sidelines saying complete or incomplete, and then they move on. There's not enough time. It's not reasonable to expect everyone's going to go deep on everything that they are exposed to. And so ultimately, because of heuristics, or the colloquial way of saying it, just your gut decision making, you come up with a decision in the absence of data and you need to immediately, and you decide. And subconsciously, while we're on our phones, we are doing that as we are scrolling past story after story after story. No one is saying, of course, I'm going to make a gut level decision about this story. They do, though. And then they move on, whether or not you realize it. So I don't know if that gets any closer, Richard, to explaining it, but that's what I got right now.
That's helpful, even if most of the audience may not follow American football and thinks that football is really soccer. But sorry, back to regular programming. Ken and Scott.
No, please, Scott, go ahead.
I'm with you, Richard. In a regular programming with football and soccer, we have to be not only the coach, the owner, the forwards, and the goalie. And I think what ends up happening more is we're doing the defense and not thinking about the offense. So the Nature Medicine Commission on Quality Health Information for All is titled to be the offense, is titled to define what is quality health information for all in the digital era. So, very specifically, we're looking at, what David referred to as what I still get the newspaper, the legacy media, how we read it, how we interpret it, and how we process it. But we're also dealing with the new media, which obviously is digital, such as this. But even one more level, when you get to both the phone and AI as the delivery device and the designer, we have to think about that. So what is quality? Well, quality includes the provenance, includes the source integrity. And what's most important, I think what all of us should think of on this call is our universities have source credibility and provenance that are amongst the highest respected in countries, in amongst our publics. Those institutions last longer than some of our governments. And we need to think how we can build that source credibility with quality information that comes out. I see some people in the chat, for example, you hear my accent. I think all of us are based in the United States. The CDC used to be the primary institution where we would go for information on health, whether it be for global health or whether it be, on a local level. Do I choose a vaccine? Do I choose to have preventative behaviors and so forth? But those institutions are under attack, and those institutions don't have the same source of credibility and quality that they used to. So we have to go to the academic health centers in many cases, or the universities that are the umbrella, or those intermediaries that have degrees that generally, not everybody has the same professional degree with the same level, but generally are trusted sources. So we're working very much on the offense to build what is quality, and source credibility is one. We could go into the other aspects of good communication. Of course, it's empathetic, it's understandable, it's scientifically sound, and I'm happy to talk more about that, as well as are there ways that we could have, whether you call them labels, badges, other ways that the public knows they're getting information that's trustworthy and is valuable and is scientifically sound and up to date. And that's what we're working on.
Yeah. I want to just add a layer to this conversation that I think is something we assume as communicators, but we don't often name it. And I think in this environment, it's really to our disadvantage. And I think David alluded to it a little bit. It's the neurobiological toll that all of this noise takes on people. We're asking even what Scott just described in terms of now these extra steps, these proof points that we have to do, even the notion that you now have to think differently about who's at that table and doing the outreach. There is an emotional and intellectual load that has been added to everyone's plate in this reality, where you are sourcing new information, confirming that information. That blue check mark now matters in so many ways. But it also means that you've got all of you folks on the call, us and everyone else that we're interacting with, and those audiences that are making decision points at every moment of the day, they're fatigued constantly. And I think if we don't acknowledge that, that is a real sort of missing piece to the reality that everyone's navigating. That emotional toll, because the truth is we make decisions, to David's point about, you see the thing, you believe it's true. That headline looks right. It's laid out in the right font at the right paper. I believe that that's true, even if all I did was scroll past it. We're making decisions emotionally first, always.
Always.
And this notion that, you all are smarter, better, faster, more expert, that's a nice thought. It's not the truth. It's our job to constantly, meet in the middle there, have the mind and the heart work in consort. But I would posit right now, everyone's heart, so to speak, is constantly being asked to do more and more. And that load, that debt that we're taking on, because information is so fractured and so irregularly brought to us, and so many of these institutions that we know and believe in and have trusted for generations, if not millennia in some cases, are now being called into question. There is a piece of this conversation that has to acknowledge that we're coming to this neurobiologically compromised regularly every day. So just make sure that that's also something that we're acknowledging with each other, our colleagues, and with the audiences that we're trying to reach.
Yeah, and if I could have 30 seconds to add on top of that, thank you, Marina. It's the emotional part that I want to double down on, because social media's entire purpose, the algorithm that are driving what you see on social media, is 100% emotionally driven. The only purpose of an algorithm that is sharing content in front of you is to keep you on that platform. The best way to keep you on that platform is to emotionally trigger you. So it's going to offer you information that gets an emotional response because it knows that it's going to keep you there longer. And so when we are constantly being triggered emotionally, as Marina is so aptly putting, that does a lot of things. First of all, it makes us enact that confirmation bias I spoke of quickly because we have to. And secondly, it is so tiresome, it stops us from looking deeper into other topics because we are exhausted intellectually and emotionally, and we don't necessarily know who to trust. So all of these things are coming together to define a media world where that is what has changed. Sure, the politics maybe have changed, the administration has changed, all sorts of other human elements have changed that are causing the challenges, but also at the same time, it's the infrastructure of the information that is being fed to us and that we are trying to leverage.
Great. Thank you all for that. So we've done a good job of laying out a challenge. We've described the situation and we've talked a little bit about some sort of solution, but I really want to focus. I'm going to challenge you all to really, really focus on universities, public health institutions, and others who do not do this, what we're talking about, for a living every day. So let's try to figure out or think about how do we help institutions get ahead with this misinformation curve? What do they need to know to avoid continuing these issues? I want to go back to change. What do they need to, what are some ideas about what people can do to get ahead in this misinformation age? And I'll start with you, David, because your eyes are rolling like you're really trying to conjure up an answer.
It's more like I'm trying to come up with an answer that doesn't take 45 minutes.
Okay.
It's some of what I've said before, but it is understanding not just the audiences that you're trying to attract.
Mm-hmm.
It is being cognizant of the audiences that you know will take issue with what you are about to say.
Very good.
Because if you trigger them, if you anger them to get them to start doing hot takes and lots of sharing within the social media ecosystem, the algorithms note that there's a lot of conversation and trending engagement around that topic. And then the algorithms across these platforms start sharing it more and more, so organically more human beings see it. And suddenly you're in a situation where you came out with something and you announced it, but you said things in a way that worked against the ideological beliefs of 30% of the country. And then they took to social, where they're very adept, and they start knocking down what you just said and introducing misinformation into the narrative. And then those algorithms pick it up. Now you have a manipulated narrative in the social space. And then the worst possible outcome from that event is that traditional media picks it up. And Scott brought up the trusted sources, of which is a profound part of what we're dealing with today. Gen AI, for example, will look to the news stories that just wrote about the narrative manipulation. Even if it wasn't called manipulation, it suddenly gets legitimized as truth because now it's in the New York Times and on Fox News. And now when you go to Google and search and you get back an AI response, you're getting the response from those mainstream news channels and educational outfits that are telling everyone else the negative or the misinformation. I said that poorly, but long way of saying what you can do immediately and differently is really understand the psychology behind not just the people that you're trying to impact positively, but understand those communities that may take issue with what you're about to say and make sure that you say it in a way that doesn't incite them to share heuristically and with hot takes negatively that supports their agenda.
I'd say,
So,
I'd say that's one of the biggest takeaways, if you will, from what we have all been going through this past year. As much as if you have time to plan, when you're doing your planning and doing your what if, and if I say this, then what if that, we've seen in real time how this has happened. And to David's point, so is it sitting there and saying, okay, but what if this happens? What if that happens? And this sounds terrible, but assume many people are out to do you some kind of harm, reputational harm, financial harm, whatever. And if you're able to put yourself and think through that, really truly anticipate the worst case scenario and back up from there. And it's not perfect. I mean, Scott will tell you that, some things will work with some audiences in some regions and other things will not. And sometimes you're doing exactly the right things and it still blows up. The best you can do is try and plan and anticipate, and we have seen it. We've seen the worst has happened in many cases here. So if you start adopting that mindset from the get-go, number one, that leads to the kind of planning that David can walk through in terms of what does that mean when you start to approach it with, the algorithms will do this. But if you think about how your work can be twisted and used wrongly, that helps you anticipate. And then you're also able to sort through when something happens. Is this a crisis? Is this something that really does require our attention and remediation? Or is this one that is just, it's going to die down in a day or so? And that helps you assess where is the true harm going to be. And Scott mentioned this earlier, this also goes to that level of trusted sources in terms of what journals, and as a journal editor, you know this, there's the journals that we all look to that once upon a time there were, I hate to say some of us on this call are old enough to remember when there was a handful, JEM, a New England Journal. But now there's not only the Nature family of communications and how many are under Nature or Science, but then there's all these open source, and they're not all legit. There are the paper mills. So trying to deal with that when you're planning a comms rollout. You have to think about that too. What might get picked up and have a different name put on it? You might be putting something out in a reputable journal, but someone can grab the content and slap something else on it, and where do we go? So there's a lot of elements that are, to Marina's point, uncomfortable to think about. We didn't want to do this. This is not why we went into this, but it is the reality.
And I would add, it's not, in my experience, yes, it's very uncomfortable, especially when you've got this amazing thing that you would like to promote. And now you have to sit there and think of what are the worst possible things that someone could say about it. Nobody likes going there. So conceding that, I think, is important. But it's also about making sure that in your effort to put that information out, it doesn't go awry in the way that we're talking about. And I'm not saying either way that an opinion that might work against you is legitimate or illegitimate. That's not the point.
Right.
The point is the point that they are trying to make can get out there if they want it to. So deliberating whether or not it's legitimate or illegitimate is not necessarily as important or as one might think. But also, to the doubling down on what you said there, it's really important to know if it matters and how big this complaint is going to be. And there are a lot of ways to ascertain whether or not this conversation that's bubbling up working against you is significant or insignificant. And it's complicated, but by and large, it comes down to, is it intersecting with a large cultural flashpoint? Is it visual? Is it new information? Who's behind the sharing of the information? Is it an entity, or is it a couple of frustrated people? I've seen many times when organizations act based upon one or two tweets like the sky is falling. It's not falling. But you can make it fall if you respond to that in the wrong way, because then you trigger the algorithm and to say, oh, this company responded defensively. We all know what that means. And suddenly there's thousands of tweets across multiple platforms instead of a dozen tweets just on Twitter or Instagram.
I'm going to jump in really quickly with a call for questions because I think most of you see there's a Q&A function here. The good news is everyone else on the call won't see your question. The even better news is that we will see your questions, and I'm going to throw out a challenge because I find that usually we have a bunch of overachievers. I'm going to challenge everyone who's participating on this call to get us to 5 questions. And if we have at least 3 that are really good questions, then we're in a good shape. But put them on, and we'll start fielding them. Over to you, Ken.
Great, thank you. I want to get tactical for a minute. We've done big picture thinking, that kind of thing. I want to get as tactical as we can be. Let's talk about, we're trying to avoid something happening from putting out papers, research, or just making announcements about daily functions in a university setting, in a school of public health. I'd like to talk about, we've touched on audience a little bit. I want to go a little deeper into audience. And no one on this panel can use the word general public when we talk about audience. What do you want that audience to do when they get your information? And then I like to talk about what we say and how we say it, particularly jargon. Like, do people understand? Like, can the word that you love so much to use, can it be misconstrued and used against you? And then I like to talk about when you do, let's say you do face a crisis, who should be the voice of your response and why? Like, is it always the person at the top? That type of thing. That's what I'd like to know. And then David, I want to start with you to talk about how do you know ahead of time who could possibly be against you, when you're trying to communicate externally.
So in this particular context, understanding who might be against you takes monitoring and listening and media assessment. So using tools that can look in social and discover what they are saying about your brand or your school and your organization is one thing. But also looking at, let's say you're coming out with a study on X, then you go and see what people are saying in X, and then you cluster those conversations about X into different topics. This group of people feels this way about X. This group of people feels this way about X. And roughly, you're going to come up with 3 or 4 different clustered groups. And the reason why we cluster is because there are thousands and thousands of people talking. And to just look at thousands of Instas or tweets or TikToks is not as helpful as clustering the main core arguments being leveraged in that social space to be able to say, okay, now I see if I come out with this announcement, this body of people that feels this way about this topic, who are very digitally savvy and who have money and perhaps some celebrities or authoritative figures behind this argument, is going to react when we say this. So that's the way that you can get ahead of it, is by saying, if I'm going to come out with X, I know anti-X people exist. And I know that they're on Discord and Reddit. And I know this is why they feel this way. Taking all of that information in helps you develop your response strategy or your communication strategy, because you know what words to avoid. It's not even any differently than Thanksgiving, and you know there are words to avoid at the Thanksgiving table with certain relatives, right? Like, just not going to go there because it's not going to go where I want it to go. It's easy to understand the crazy uncle, but it's not so easy to understand thousands and thousands of people all at the same time. So that's why we at Finn at least cluster these conversations into core arguments and then address that argument as opposed to any individual people.
Yeah. I'd say, just to even step further back than what David's describing, is to start with the end in mind, right? Like, you should be going into the release of any information, but particularly a peer-reviewed scientific information, thinking through, where are the naysayers? What can we anticipate? And creating your communication strategy, whether it's your social media plan or your earned media outreach plan, with the notion that there will be someone who may have an agenda that will come for the research and look to poke holes in it. I mean, that's the nature of what everyone here does anyway.
Yeah.
So just really being even more proactively prepared for that conversation to occur and having a plan for addressing it. Again, to the point of, how bad will it be? Is it worthy of spending time and energy trying to fight it, or letting it bubble up and dissipate? Or do we really think there is an entire, group organizing around the takedown that needs to be addressed?
Thanks. So, Scott, question for you. Like, everything that we're talking about, you have done and you're doing and will continue to do. So I see a tension point in what you first said about the initial reaction is to be like the deer in the headlights and not do anything. David and Marina just told us some ideas about what can be done. How do you, as a person who has done this, how do you resolve that tension point between, this is uncomfortable for me, but, these experts are telling me that this is how it's done? You're muted.
Thanks, Ken. That's a good question. I think it is a challenge for those of us who are on here to think about what you've been doing and what you need to do differently. So I don't think this is incremental in scope. So we should do 80% of what we've been doing and, focus on that new 20%, if I could say, that's more novel and innovative and so forth. That's sort of just old business rules, right, or suggestions. Having said that, what do institutions do well? We have education departments that are both internal and external, this whole continuing education and other areas. I think we should not throw out the ideas of, you asked the question, who do we communicate with? And it's not Gen Pop.
Hmm.
It still is a grass tops. It's a highly educated audience that needs to have the information that they can use and put it in health literate terms for their publics or their groups, what we call them learned intermediaries or so forth. So I think we need to probably still turn up the volume on those. I've done just recently too on vaccine communication. One was with the state of New York, and it's a continuing ed piece, and it's on and on. Yesterday, I did one with a group out of Cornwall and Qatar, and there were I don't know, hundreds of people that were just on that, and it's not so it was static. Maybe there are hundreds of people. They're going to post it, but good communication people will be able to run. You could excerpt a lot of different audiograms of that. You could drive it to the people to remind them. You can take the kind of content and put it in different ways that people will digest and use it on all different mediums. So I think we need to think about that. So that's sort of the 80% of what we've been doing, but bring some of the novel pieces in. And then I think what we need to do is what people are saying here, pay attention, whether you called it media forensics or whatever it might be. What are the threats to your brand? What are the threats to your institution that when you see it, you have somebody who could speak out and the same person, the same trusted source, whether it's, the chancellor, the president, whatever dean, whatever level it might be. Uh, somebody's also put in the chat, our professional organizations, the library associations. I just spoke to the American Medical Writers Association. They're also worried about their work being, I don't know, captured, stolen, whatever you want to call it, AI doing to it. We need to, make sure that we have these organizations. That organization, for example, has been around 85 years. That we strengthen them. I know CUGH is not as old as that, but we need to strengthen the organization and also have the organizations focus on their mission and how they can help the member institutions or the members. In this case, with CUGH engaged, and hence that's why I think all of you are on this call here today. We want to help with the strategy. We don't want to also have uh, the institutions that we trust be imperiled by this new wave that is, I do like the football analogy, but again, it's the football analogy of the goalie. We are being hit every moment. I think Jennifer said nobody expected everything at once, from the funding to, I mean, another big university in the Midwest yesterday settled to give money to the administration. I mean, it is not pleasant in the United States, and notwithstanding, the global health work that, we'd like to be doing, and we need to find a way to do it.
Yeah. If I could just add to that, I know David's going to talk a little bit about the question of allies and finding people for messaging, but to that point about the professional associations or different groups, I mentioned earlier, look for those individuals, schools, groups that may not be the same as you, but that complement you because they're dealing with similar issues. So I mentioned climate, that's just one example, but we are all in this together. And if there's a way to ally with some other institutions and work together as advocates to advance the entire platform, and I use another example in the US, the different associations that represent higher ed have come together in a way that hadn't always been. So you have the AAU is working with ACE and AAUP in different ways to help make those cases. And so on a global level, there may be ways to look for those allies whose work and mission complement yours and a more united front that way. And David, that I know you want to talk more about finding those allies. And I saw the question about social media platforms to research. So we'll go back to that one as potentials, but I hand it to you for the allies. You're muted, David. Come on, guys.
I feel like I'm responsible when I put the mute button on and then irresponsible when I forget to turn it off. Allies is an interesting question because at no point am I suggesting that that's not just as important as I tend to talk about the detractors more, right? But the allies can be found in the same way by doing deeper research. And I have a personal frustration, I guess I'll just say it this way, with a lot of the social media monitoring tools where you're trying to go find outside advocates, not those that are known, but those people that may support you, because you're really, unless you're using some much more powerful tool than the general ones, you're really only listening to Twitter. So you're only listening to one social platform if you're supposedly monitoring social media with some of these dashboards. So that's not giving you the information that you need. You need to look much more deeper into the forums that are having the conversations that you're talking about, and to look broadly across all the video channels that are not necessarily getting picked up with the social media platforms as well. So finding those allies is how you get to the solution. But similarly, as I said about using words that you don't want to trigger the other side into an emotional response, when you're working with allies and talking to them, counseling that as well about we need to avoid these topics, we need to avoid these incendiary words, those kind of things. So I don't know if that is what you were looking for, Jen, as far as allies goes, but that's what I have.
Me, I'd add, because again, I'd loop us all the way back to like the fundamentals. Anytime we're releasing something out into the world, we want to make sure that that strategic approach, the strategic communications plan is really like fully baked. That includes not just your allies, but your surrogates too, right? And I think that's fundamental to the conversation here. With more limited resources, with, the environment being as chaotic as it is, it just behooves everyone to take that extra step at the front end and make sure that communications plan is really fully baked. And we're thinking through all the layers of messengers and their connection to audiences and sub audiences with the authenticity to deliver our message as effectively as possible. You know, I I don't think we're telling any secrets. Like, this is a coordinated effort to discredit institutions that have been trusted for generations and have been doing work around the world in a coordinated manner that in the most basic way makes the world a better place. For whatever reasons, and we all have our opinion about that, there is a very coordinated effort to create an existential threat to that system and approach of work. So how do we counter that? We come back to community, and that's what everyone here represents. It sounds really simple. It is incredibly difficult to pull off because we all know the way we've done it and are comfortable doing it and need to now figure out different language to reach different partners, different allies, different surrogates, different stakeholders. Again, to Scott's point, we're talking a rarefied space. We're not going out to, Jill and Joe fill in your local community. We are going to peers and sometimes competitors, right? It's what we call in the robotics world, the co-opetition model. We really do need to find those places where we're creating allyship with folks that tomorrow may be sitting on the opposite end of the table from us, competing for the same resource. But there is a larger issue at play that demands that we figure out a way forth, that virtuous circle that includes everyone. And communication really sits at the core of that. What are the messages that we can all rally around? And organizations like this one bringing you all to the table and refining those tools and resources. You already have wonderful toolkits available to your member institutions. How do we update those and refine them to meet the moment? It's uncomfortable, but it's good old shoe leather, I would say. You just have to sort of knock on those doors and take those phone calls and think through the layers of partners and surrogates and other messengers that just carry water for the audiences you're going to talk to. And then, of course, all the cool digital tools, which, David can tell you will change next month, but that's our job to stay on top of them.
So Jen, I have a question for you. When you do a lot of this work. So when let's say you come on with a new university client,
Mhm.
Let's talk about the toolkits and the operations. Like when you look at or audit a university or a school of public health communications operation, what are some of the processes and materials that you think are really that should be there to make sure that they're actually ready to manage any potential reputational issues?
Well, as Maria said, this sounds so basic, some of it, but we are looking for things as simple as what is the information flow? Who controls it? How is it shaped? When is it going out? What is the cadence of information that is leaving the institution? Because there's that fine line between keeping a steady pipeline so people remember you are a trusted source of important information and having so much they tune you out. So beginning to look at what you're putting out, and this goes to the issue of research. There's lots of papers being done by lots of faculty members, and we help them assess, okay, you've got lots of faculty putting this out. It's all important research. It's all worthy. It has import, but it's not all ready for public, like the common public consumption. And so how do you weight and rate what you're putting out so that you are putting out the most useful information, the most actionable, the kind that policymakers need, that individuals need. We help them take some things out that they might be doing that are just pointless. It's nice to have some, we have, Dave can talk more about this. We have 20 different social media feeds. Why? Good, because that helps. It's diluting your brand and it's giving more opportunity for the bots, the trolls, the people out there to grasp things with your name on it. So sometimes it's an audit just of how much do you have of each thing? What are you doing with all of it? Are you up to speed on the latest tools? Are you doing best practices? Simple things too on how you're writing what you're putting out. And this goes to everything from understanding how to take an abstract or an actual paper and turn that into something that's usable for the general population to what you're putting on your own Blue Sky feed. So helping them understand who's seeing what and how to speak and explain your ideas in that emotional, compelling way that's not laden with scientific jargon. So there's a retraining there, and really, it's easy for the outside person to come in. So what is this whole channel over here that's just a bunch of abstracts? That's not helping anybody. And they're like, well, I want my peers to see it. Like your peers are seeing it, put it on LinkedIn. Don't clog up channels. So it's a little of everything, Ken. It's looking at the processes they have. Are they working? Just because you've always had it, if it's not working, get rid of it. Replace it with something that's fresher, more modern, more accessible. And what are you missing? How are you speaking about yourselves and your work there? Um, so it's a little of everything. And there's a lot of conversations that often end with, why did we do that? And why do we do it that way? Because again, our first goal is to protect, and we haven't really talked about the sports analogy here. The is it unforced errors? The
Mm,
mistakes we make ourselves that we didn't need to make because we weren't paying attention or we didn't think about it, or you said it a certain way, or you tagged the administration in your tweet because you were angry, things like that. So we do that whole assessment and come back with them and help them clean out that wheat from the chaff and then build out from there. And it's easier on this side to say, that's dumb. Let's not do that one anymore. Here's a smarter way to do it.
great,
Scott, I'm
great.
sure you've experienced some of this.
Yeah, Scott, first of all, thank you all for the time. I want to be aware of the time, and I'd like to get to some participant questions. But before we do, I just have to ask you, Scott. So, based upon what Jen just said, like talking about internally, how would you expect how what's the best way that you've seen a school of public health operate within a larger university system in a situation like this when it comes to strategic communications, and then put like a lens of reputation risk on top of that as well?
Well, I mean, Ken, thanks. And as I said, I've been at two schools of public health, at least Columbia Mailman and now CUNY School of Public Health. I think institutions are part of bigger universities. I think that's the other piece. And we during COVID, we actually worked very proactively that we had the first surveys that were done in New York at the center of the epidemic and then pandemic. and we were putting these out proactively on Monday, or we fielded a survey. Monday we were there serving the community, whether it ended up in the New York Times, the governor's office, wherever else in the world. And then we did 30 countries. We just had a recent 30 country survey on how people are consuming information, and hopefully we'll have that published sometime early next year. We could share it because I think it is very interesting that the assumption is that everybody's on social media getting their information. That is not always the case, and particularly even in that, just the top line is we're finding when they want social media, they don't want video. They just want text and pictures. Give me the info that I need. So I think universities still some want to make the perfect the enemy to good. I think Jennifer's points were really well taken. How many handles do we have? How many places are we putting this? And I get information overload from some other schools of public health. And I think that does dilute their brand, but that I know who they are. So maybe that's what they want. So I think we have to be much more strategic. We certainly try to do that. We don't overload with the information that we put out in the community. But I also think also with the professional organizations and others here, some of us own, Mass Medical Society is New England Journal of Medicine, JAMA is the American Medical Association. A lot of these other, and we've had this traditional firewall, but we need to get editorials and ongoing engagement of people together on this. And I mean, we're working on one with my journal that we hope to get across a number of Taylor and Francis Routledge journals on just how scientific editors need to engage and think about the future, get ahead of the AI part, to be frank, but also embrace quality. And I don't know that all institutions have that. And I think what everybody knows here, the communication departments are generally pretty small in these institutions, and they do need support from experts, whether it be, Fin partners, sometimes it's their faculty, other times it's other parts of the university. So I think there's a different skill set. I think that everybody's talked about what people need. And it's a challenge. I mean, I'll tell people communication, you're the salmon swimming upstream, or you are you're the lone person trying to say, communication is not an afterthought, communication is central. It's just our plight. And I think hopefully we've come across ways to not be the deer in the headlight and know that you also have resources and services that can help not have unforced errors. I like that analogy as well, Jennifer.
Yeah, I think that point again, I made this very early on about getting to know your comms teams, whether they're in school-based, and they are often small, and they've got everybody coming at them every day for everything from crisis to, can you post this on the website? Everything. Get to know them early. Don't wait until something happens. Also, even if you've got good news and you have a new paper coming out, don't wait till the day before to say, I have the work of my lifetime dropping tomorrow in the Lancet. Please don't do that to them because they want to help you. So get to know them early. Give them advance notice. That's the best way they can help you and support you in delivering on your personal and professional mission, because they want to do that for the school. And then taking it back up to that institutional level, the more that the institutional level comms team is at least aware of what's happening at the individual schools. They don't have to be in the mix of it every day. Can't be, and they don't need to be, but they have to be aware. So if, let's just say you're going to publish something that might be controversial in some sections, the sooner they know at both your school level and the university level, the more prepared they are to protect you, to protect the work, and then to protect both levels of the institution, because it works both ways. If the university reputation is taking a battering from whomever, that trickles down to your individual school. Same happens if the school itself is getting hit. People are connecting that to the university. So you don't have to be besties with them, but get to know them, let them get to know you, know you're there, know what work is coming that could be either amazing and life-changing or controversial or both, so that they can, help them help you, if that makes sense.
Great. I think that's a very good way to end our panel discussion. Thank you all panelists, my colleagues and our friend, Dr. Ratzan. Thank you all so much. Richard, I'll turn it back to you. I think we're going to take some questions from the participants.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. So I think we actually have some very good questions that have lined up. And the first one comes in, how do we create a social media outlet which is based on university research, sourcing, and peer-reviewed journal publications? It's a tricky question, but I want to put that out there in case anybody had some ideas.
That's a big question. Are you, I'm sorry, I don't know who asked the question, but are you thinking one that is cross institution, just broadly speaking? And I think here, because I know, for example, AAU tries to do some of that with its focus on the research that gets done at member institutions, but that's only 71 institutions, so it's not at all comprehensive. There was something called Futurity for a while. Scott, I'm not aware of anything that might be cross-institution, cross-discipline. So that potentially could be something taken up by an association or a global group. I mean, it'd be hard to get one institution to do it, but if you're looking for, I mean, I don't want to say CUGH could do it, but that makes sense. Would have to be anchored in something, some
Yeah.
entity that reaches all kinds of institutions and researchers and clinicians. That's not an answer, really, but I think it's a
Here's a sort of a dull hygiene answer from the communications brain. I think you'd need to think through your content strategy first, right? So particularly if it's cross-disciplinary, how are we rolling content out so that it's so our audience can anticipate what they get when? What's the frequency of our share, and what is our platform? Like Jen said it earlier, you don't need to go onto every single social platform. Who's our audience? Is there such an audience that would want all the content from everywhere? And if we decide that there is such an audience, then where are we likely to find them? I would posit it's probably something like LinkedIn, although it could be something like Reddit or even Discord, frankly. So there's a lot of questions to answer before you think through even getting it out into the world.
That's good. So second question I'm going to throw over to you, David. This comes in and I'll just read it. From my vantage point, it seems like many universities are losing trust by cowering to the current administration and cutting DEI programming, gender studies, etc. The panelists, you guys mostly, I'm just going to point to you, not me, seem to think the opposite. Wondering what you think it might take for universities to lose trust. David, fifth time. Come on, man.
I think that's the fourth time. I love the question because the answer is interesting. Yes, the cutting of those elements has led to a loss of trust within a certain subset of the population. Meanwhile, it has increased their trust, or it has given them some street cred across a different part of the population. And both of those populations are very significant, call them 20, 30, 40%. I don't know where to go with that. So this is the challenge that we are talking about, that no matter which choice you make, you are going to get criticized on the other side. And I'll be really candid. I was in a pitch not so long ago to a corporate accounting law firm, and this was back in February, I introduced the challenge of removing or not removing your DEI and purpose pages on your website. Because at that time, the administration was saying, you may lose your government contracts if you don't remove your DEI pages. And so I was introducing that as a challenge for this corporate law firm. After the fact, I come to learn that my saying that offended someone very significant at that prospective client, because their belief was that because the administration was saying do it, that it's an easy choice, just remove it. Why would people care? There's a mandate, we do it. Meanwhile, the other half of the room, the same company I was pitching to, felt differently. And it kind of exposed the point that I was trying to make, which is no matter which choice you make, you are going to have a contingent of people that like you and don't like you as a reaction to that. So fundamental, going back an hour to what I think it was Jennifer that said, staying true to the mission is what matters. So understanding that either choice, you're going to get criticized, But staying true to your mission is the only constant or the only consistent that you can carry through this, because I personally believe, and this is definitely my one person opinion, I do think we're in a moment of time where we are going through something where we're going to come out on some kind of other side. Right now, the ambiguity of it, the unknown nature of trying to communicate in this world, it's almost impossible to do. But I think we are moving toward a place of more stability in time. And so that's why it's so important to stay true to your mission, because at that point, if people can point back and say, oh, you just threw away your mission as soon as it was convenient to do so, that kind of negative reputation is going to live for a long time.
Yeah.
The number of university presidents I've spoken with directly or heard from in different venues, that's where they have to get back. They really have to focus on the mission and how they continue to deliver on the mission, even at a time when they're getting this from the administration. And we all feel this way. There are times you want to shake your fist at the sky and say, why isn't everybody just standing strong? And we have to remember with universities that each one is facing a different set of circumstances. It's a little easier for private universities to stand strong on something than it is for publics. It is also easier for a public in a more quote unquote blue state to do so than it is when you're in a state that is squarely behind the administration, because it's just the nature of the institution. So how do you find your way as a university leader to a place where you can still deliver on that mission and still serve those different constituencies without constantly waving the red flag, as it were, in front of the bull? And it's not an easy place. And nobody wants to do that. No one wants to just cut that out, because and whether you change the nomenclature, you can do some of that. Early on, we saw some people saying, well, we're just going to change it to X. I'm like, you think they can't see that? They're going to figure that out too. You change the words, but you're still doing the same thing. And so that's why from an outside perspective, there certainly seems to be a lot of, wishy-washiness or always caving. And that's probably the case with some institutions, but not all. And I can tell you most are trying to find that balance where they are protecting either small groups or small institutions or small schools and the larger enterprise, if you will. And it's a very difficult path to walk. I don't envy any of them.
Richard, will you do me a favor and read the question? I want to make sure that we're answering the question as it was stated.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No. This is my no. This is my brain working. It sounds like it was like, how can we lose? How did we? And what the panelists disagreed.
Well, there's a sense right now, I think, that we think that we're not recommending cowering to the administration. And so this is basically like what this group thinks that we can do to actually help universities protect trust.
I mean, I can specifically answer wondering what you think it might take for universities to lose trust. And I guess what I'm trying to suggest is they have lost trust with a large percentage of the population because of what Marina said, the existential attack and threat that is being introduced against the discipline in the industry. And so whether or not it's DEI or otherwise, that's not the core criticism that's being lodged against them. The people that are lodging the criticism against these institutions is doing so because they simply have been told not to trust them. And a lot of people are buying that and then being given information where they tend to agree with it. So they are being manipulated. Many people are being manipulated into believing things that are not true. So it doesn't matter if it's DEI or anything else. If it weren't DEI, tragic as that is, it would just be a different thing to use as a target. DEI was just an incredibly successful, unfortunate situation.
Sure. So I think so. Yes. So this is just me, not the moderator, Ken. This is communicator Ken. I think that what I see a lot of, let's take institutions, universities out of it. Like when it comes to, if I'm on the opposite side of where you are, what I want to do is tear you down. And the first thing I do to tear you down is I position you as a threat to our shared values. I'll say, critical race theory goes against, it's teaching reverse racism. That's what I'm going to do, because that's the unspoken shared value of equality, and you are against that. DEI, same thing. Now, what I think, this is just me, disclaimer, I think what has happened is that we have used words and phrases that don't resonate with people, so they don't get it. I'm old enough to remember affirmative action, and then we went into underserved communities, and then we went into diversity, and then we added equity to that. I was one of the founders of coming up with racial equity 15 years ago. Inclusion, and these are words that people don't use them every day, and it's hard for them to understand it when you put them together, and then when you put an acronym on it. And then when a lot of times when organizations came out using this, particularly after the summer of 2020, they didn't tie it to a larger value of American value. We did for about 3 weeks in May and June of 2020, and then we stopped. It became, if you are not doing this, you are bad, as opposed to what is happening is bad. We have to change our systems, our social and economic systems, to bring equity to all. We stopped doing that, and it turned into Corporation A made this donation, and it turned into, on the other side, people are saying what they are doing is a threat to you and your children, and we didn't fight back. So you lose trust when you don't fight for your values and fight for your mission.
And I would argue that that shift can happen because largely of social media and the emotionally
Yes,
driven problems that I was talking about earlier. It's not like
absolutely.
anyone made that conscious decision to make that shift. It is the tool that we use to get the information that pushed it into that adversarial direction.
Exactly. And
I,
a lot,
I could just add, I just want to make sure we acknowledge that this is a very American-centric part of the discussion,
oh, yes, very
right?
much.
And we have a lot of guests on here who are not.
Yeah,
And
Thank you.
to David's point, that aspect of the social media fomenting that distrust, you can take the American part
yeah,
out of it. That situation is happening around the globe. It just doesn't have a
yeah,
DEI element to it. It has other parts of that distrust, whether it's distrust of science or whatever. So I just wanted to acknowledge that
yeah,
we're diving down this very American focused rabbit hole, but the fundamental, the tools, that what's driving it, that's applicable
yeah,
anywhere. And
Yeah.
and that sticking with your mission or your knitting or whatever still applies
yeah.
elsewhere.
Take
Am
out
I,
the
am I,
take out American values,
yeah,
and it becomes human values. It becomes,
exactly.
our basic fundamental values as people who walk this earth.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
think at that more global level, what we're also talking about is the erosion of trust in expertise and
Mhm.
intellect, right? I'm old enough to remember Dan Quayle and the conversations, Vice President of the United States and C student, which had everyone going, oh my gosh, you can't be a C student and be Vice President of the United States. Well, of course you can. But, this notion that intellectualism and expertise are things that should be questioned, partially because we've democratized access through the internet and social media to knowledge, but also partially because, again, I don't think any of us are naive enough to think there is not an agenda working behind some of this, right? And I think many of you at your institutions probably got the NSF forbidden words list at some point in the last 12 months. And this notion about language that we're talking about, yes, some of it was incredibly performative and jargony and meaningless. And if you really do some of the work that we do, and we're asked at various points in time since 2020 to look and see what all these initiatives were really creating, what you saw was the rebranding of CSR efforts, the relabeling of long existing, programmatic outreach to communities. Now, at the institutional level in higher ed, it's a slightly different thing, right? The machine and the system that allowed you all to access funding from federal sources was rewired radically within, a few weeks. And there are consequences in terms of protecting generations of work. I would say keep your notes, right? The notion of like just going in and changing the language compromises research, and that matters in the long term. So make sure everything is backed up, but also go ahead and look for the opportunity to say, is there a way to rephrase what we're looking at in a way that is actually deeper and smarter and serves us better in the long term? We've encountered that with a lot of our assignments over the last several months, where we've literally had to scrub language for various clients to protect work. So, and it's not as simple as like, oh, well, now they know we're gonna call. It's actually going through the real exercise of saying, if we can't use these words, what words are we going to use that will continue the spirit and the mission of the work and may actually deepen it?
Mm-hmm.
And that's been the sort of surprise aha moment oftentimes that we encounter. And it is a rigorous communications exercise. It also calls you to challenge a lot of the assumptions you walk into doing a lot of the research work that you're doing. So it is, again, a place of deep discomfort, but requires trust that you're walking into a very different space with colleagues and partners that are aligned with you. So again, those fundamental questions early on in the conversation: where are we going? Why are we going there? What do we hope to achieve? Who needs to come with us? Whom have we not included until now that can actually help us get deeper and further if we do so? That's really the sort of unstated opportunity in all of this. And again, acknowledging the emotional load that takes on everybody, because it really it's going to push people out, and it's going to draw different people into the work. And that is not easy to do
Yeah.
for anyone.
Yeah. I think Marina, we're giving you that last word because you also, I think, just touched on one of the last questions around how we can build allies and the role of allies in helping to amplify and validate messaging. And that really hit on it. The other point is there was a great long point that was put in to the Q&A, which I've just posted on chat, so everyone can see it and just consider it, because I think it's meaningful. I'm going to leave it at that because we're at our last minute, and this has been a terrific and very robust conversation. I want to thank all the panelists and Ken, superb job for moderating, and weaving us through this discussion. The other thing I'll do is just for everyone who's still on the participant list, I'll invite you to reach out to us. We're all on LinkedIn. If you want to reach out, we're happy to answer questions afterwards and continue the conversation. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a great rest of the workshop.
Right. Thank you.